I'm back already. Like I mentioned before, this is my spring break. I'm just hanging out this week, and I I tend to get requests, and someone requested that I do a revolting cocks video. And as I've explained before in past videos, I have my records all over the place. I have some here in my home. The majority of them are in storage. But it dawned on me that I've got the first three Revolting Cocks records here in the house, and I thought, you know what? Why not do another video? Um, I have a lot of passion about RevCo, as I do all things related to Al Jourgensen, and I thought, screw it. I know I've done plenty of videos about Al Jourgensen and ministry, but you know what? He deserves it. He's a star. Why not talk about the RevCo album? So I'm just going to talk about the albums. I'm not going to go into the 12 inches. I don't want to ramble on too long about RevCo in this video. I'm just, sometimes I'm in the mood to hold up records. Sometimes I'm not. Today is one of those days where I'm not really in the mood. But I do have their first three albums here. And, honestly, I never really got into much Revolting Cocks after Barnyard Oddities. That's just not, I didn't get into them. RevCo kind of went down a path after Barnyard Oddities that I could not get behind. It was just music that wasn't enjoyable for me to listen to. So I'm going to focus on the first three albums. I think really anything past the first three, RevCo turned into something else. They lost the core members of their band that were there in the beginning, and they just kind of turned into a different entity. Um, but I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, and just for a moment, go back to the review of the Depeche Mode album I did last night, Memento Mori. I do want to just remind people, it's just an opinion. I know that I can come off as dismissive and like I know something that somebody else doesn't know. It is an opinion. I do get concerned about reviews being shill. I watch some more, and by the way, shill reviews means that, reviews are being put out there to artificially conflate something into something it's not. I feel like that's happening a lot with Memento Mori. I'm trying to get to the bottom of why that is. I watched a few more reviews of the album this morning on YouTube, and I'm noticing one thing. A lot of the reviewers are kind of young, look like they're in their 20s, early 30s. And that makes me wonder, maybe when you're that age, I'm not trying to slam people who are older than I am or younger than I am. But when you're in your 20s, you just don't know. I was there too. You don't have the reference points. You don't understand the context. And so it's easy to just hear something and think, oh, well, this is so cutting edge. Memento Mori is not cutting edge. There's nothing cutting edge about it if you listen to music before it. As someone who listens to a lot of experimental and cutting edge music now in these times, I take it as a bit of an affront to see people saying that Memento Mori is cutting edge. It's not. It is not cutting edge. If you listen to music, you know that Memento Mori has the same production quality as like a Taylor Swift album or something. There's nothing cutting edge about it. There are other Depeche Mode albums from years back, decades back, that are more cutting edge, that are still more cutting edge. I mean, take Black Celebration. That is a more cutting edge record now, even now, than Memento Mori is now. And when was Black Celebration released? 1986. So that's what, 37 years old now? Still more cutting edge. I think Some Great Reward is more cutting edge. Even today, it was then and it still is now, especially within the realm of Depeche Mode. It is a more cutting edge album. So I understand it's just an opinion. And I think I'm starting to maybe understand a little bit more today as I watch more reviews. A lot of these reviewers are young, so they probably just haven't heard a lot of cutting edge music. So when they hear Memento Mori, they're like, "Wow, this is really cutting edge." If there are those of you, I'll stop talking about this now. But if you're out there and you would like some recommendations as to some truly modern cutting edge music, let me know. I would be happy to send you in that direction. There's plenty of truly cutting edge music out there that's pushing the boundaries. If you want to understand what that sounds like, you will understand the difference between that and Memento Mori. Anyway, let me know if you want that. Anyway, let's focus on Revolting Cocks. Is someone out there, one of my newer subscribers, I don't know your name, dude, but he's asked me a few times to do a Revolting Cocks video. Excuse me. And I'm going to do it. And there have been other requests. There's a dude, Devin, that I know I've talked to over email. He keeps asking me for a Meat Beat Manifesto video. I will do that. Meat Beat's a band that I'm really passionate about. So I was thinking, I think I want to break down Meat Beat's albums, like album by album, and do the singles. And that's a band I really want to dive into and do it with detail because I haven't seen anybody else do that on YouTube at all. I will, Devin, the Meat Beat videos are coming, I promise. But today I'm going to do Revolting Cocks. I'm kind of in that mood, and I have the records here, the albums at least are here. So I'm going to talk about RevCo. As most of you know, RevCo is Al Jourgensen. It started as Al Jourgensen and Richard 23 from Front 242 and Luke Van Acker. And this was their first album, Big Sexy Land. And this is a recent reissue. I don't normally buy reissues. This one I did because it's a pretty cool package. Cleopatra put this out a couple of months ago. I'm not a big fan of Cleopatra. Their pressings are usually pretty bad. This one's not bad, but lately, over the last decade, they've been reissuing a lot of Ministry stuff. They're constantly reissuing Ministry side project stuff and anything related to Al Jourgensen, they've been reissuing. This is a recent reissue they did, and this is a pretty good reissue. It's on here. I'll show it since I've got it here. It's on red wax. I think you can see that kind of red marbly colored wax. Not a fan of anything other than black or clear vinyl, as I've said before. This pressing is not bad. And what's really cool about this press, in fact, it came in a gatefold sleeve too, which is cool. You have the artwork to the No Devotion 12-inch right here, and then the artwork to You Often Forget over here. So you get it's a pretty cool package. What's really cool about this is they include the full 12 inches related to this album. You get the first disc is the album, as you can see here, and then this disc, you get, what am I looking at here? Oh, here's the album right here. On the second disc, on the first side of the second disc, you get the No Devotion 12-inch, all 3 tracks. You get the extended mix of No Devotion and the 2 mixes of Attack Ships on Fire. Then on the B side, you get both versions of You Often Forget. You get the TV Mind remix, which was only released, I think, on a 7-inch at the time. That came with a magazine. This is the version 2. It only got released on the CD single of Stainless Steel Providers at the time. There was no vinyl release. So it's cool to have this here on wax. This is the remix, by the way, that you hear in Helter Skelter, the Meat Beat Manifesto classic. The sample on that track where you hear, "It's in my brain now." That's from this. That's Al Jourgensen. You Meat Beat fans out there will appreciate that. And then we get the Razormaid mix of We Shall Cleanse the World. Razormaid was a remix service in the 80s that sucked. It was a dude named Joseph Watt. Razormaid, people really loved Razormaid because it was a DJ only service. It was really hard to track them down, but the remixes themselves were garbage. Joseph Watt was basically, he did some remixing, like he did some remixing of Depeche Mode. Actually, he did the US remixes of Master and Servant. He did US remixes of It's Called a Heart. He was one of those guys. He was a DJ basically, but his Razormaid service was DJ only, promo only, and he didn't have access to any of the particular bits of the songs. He just had access to the song itself, so he would re-edit them. They weren't really remixes; they were just edits. He would take a vocal snippet and just loop it over and over. His mixes were terrible. I think I might have discussed him at length at some point in the past. Razormaid remixes were awful, but you get it here anyway. So the important thing is though is you get these two 12 inches here, which are really cool. Especially you often forget. It's a really cool song. The guy that's been uh, requesting that I do this RevCo video, he made a comment earlier today asking me what about this song. I'm still not sure what you mean. Maybe we can get into that discussion later. I don't know what you mean. He said something like, "What about you often forget?" I don't know what you mean, dude. You have to explain it more. It is a weird song, especially the Malignant version. This Malignant version is like 8.5 minutes long. It's a very strange track. Lots of bizarre vocal samples and drum patterns, and but that kind of explains this whole album. Big Sexy Land was their first album. This came out in 1986, and it's a cool record. I've always loved this album, man. I had a Subway sized poster of this cover on my wall when I was a kid. I had a t-shirt that had this. I can remember walking into local grocery stores and I had a Revolting Cock shirt on. They were looking at me like, what the hell is wrong with this kid? I love this album. I've always loved this album. And those of you who like house and techno and electro, there is some really forward thinking stuff on this, especially the title track, Big Sexy Land. If you like electro, I would, and new electro, if you're into like Carl Finlow and newer electro stuff, you should check out Big Sexy Land. This is a cool cut, man. Way ahead of its time. Still sounds good. Very cutting edge in the world of dance music. Al Jorgensen just knew his stuff. I know Richard 23 was part of the music here too, and you can definitely hear Front 242 influences on this. It's hard to pick a favorite record from RevCo. Some days it's this. I mean, a lot of times I feel like it is this album because this was my intro to them. Um, 38 is just kind of a straight ahead dance track. We Shall Cleanse the World is a little more down tempo, but really funky. A killer beat, good lyrics. Attack Ships on Fire is kind of in that same vein too. Big Sexy Land is just a big fun party electro song. Union Carbide, these two Union Carbide songs are just strange, odd, sample heavy dance tracks. Same with TV Mind. No Devotion's a slower, more plodding song, but it's all steeped in disco. This is a very disco oriented album, more so than any other RevCo album, I think. But it came out in the 80s, so it's interlaced with that industrial sound, industrial, whatever that means to you. To me, that means like it's got a kind of a dub influence. Disco is obviously in there, sadistic, weird, distorted vocals that Al Jorgensen more or less created all by himself. It's all here. You get the three guys. I can't remember. Someone tell me where these three guys come from. I want to say it came from one of the founders of Wax Trax. It's his family members, right? Is it Jim Nash? One of the two guys that owned Wax Trax, which by the way, there's a great documentary about Wax Trax Records. I was so impressed with it. I wasn't expecting a lot, but it is good. I think it was made by the daughter of one of the dudes that created Wax Trax. I may be wrong on that. Watch the documentary at any rate. It's really cool. But they call these guys the three guys. I remember at the time I'd never seen Al Jorgensen before. I thought one of these guys was him. And I thought one of them was Luke Van Acker and one of them was Richard 23. I thought that for a long time. But I think this is some old family member of the owner of Wax Trax at the time. Anyway, this is a great record. And I would highly recommend getting this new Cleopatra reissue. The original Wax Track issue is not a good pressing, never was. I don't think this is any worse or better than the original press. And you get this extra disc of B-sides and remixes. Definitely worth it. Pick this up and just listen to it anyway. It's hard for me to choose a favorite, but most days I would say it's Big Sexy Land. This just has all those 80s elements of Al's music that we loved. You get some techno, you get some electro, you get some fuzzy, distorted rock, all that stuff that Al's known for. It's all represented here. It's not as cohesive as a Ministry album. Ministry albums were more focused. But if I were to compare this to any Ministry album, it would be Twitch. And I know a lot of people think very highly of Twitch, as you should. It's a great album. I would compare this to Twitch if I had to compare it to any Ministry album. Really, really good stuff. Their next album is this, Beers, Steers, and Queers. And this album, I think traditionally is probably sounds more like a Ministry album as we know them. It's pretty dedicated to that fuzzed out, dancey, distorted vocal vibe, but it also sounds like a party, unlike Ministry albums did. Ministry albums were always very political. This isn't very political. As you can see, Beer, Steers, and Queers. It's pretty funny, if anything. Let's Get Physical. They did a version of that. Olivia Newton-John's classic. In the Neck. Get Down is probably the best song on here. Vocals by Ogre of Skinny Puppy. The thing that sucks about this vinyl version, it's got an edited version of Get Down. It's like 7 minutes on here. The full version you find on the CD and the digital versions. It's like a 14-minute track, and it's killer. I hope they've re-released Beer, Steers, and Queers a number of times, but they haven't done like an extended, expanded release like Big Sexy Land. They've just released the album. It'd be nice to have a double album of this with the album and then the remixes. Beer, Steers, and Queers was released as a 12-inch, and it's pretty good. It's not so much a remix. They kind of did a whole different version, like a punk version. And then the B-sides, they did a cover of Public Image by Public Image Limited. And what was the other track? Was it? I can't remember the other song. It's a 12-inch that it's okay. I wouldn't highly recommend it. I have it just because it's Revolting Cocks. The other single from this album is Stainless Steel Providers. I would highly recommend you pick that up because it has At the Top as the B-side. And At the Top is a great song. I don't know why it didn't get released on this album because it came out prior to the album. They put Stainless Steel Providers on here, which is a great song in itself. But At the Top is a really great little gem of a track. It would be cool to see this Beer, Steers, and Queers get an expanded vinyl release. Make sure that the Beer, Steers, and Queers remixes are on there, put At the Top on there, and then put the full version of Get Down on vinyl. We want that. We need that. But Beer, Steers, and Queers is a good record. This is probably the most cohesive RevCo record. It all flows very well. Each song feeds off of each other. Big Sexy Land sounds more like a collection of tracks that are kind of plastered onto an album, and that's not a bad thing. This flows like an album should. Some days I feel like this is my favorite RevCo album. And this came out at a really fertile time for Ministry too. Ministry had just put out the Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste album, so people were really loving on that. And then less than a year later, this came out. I mean, 1990 was a great year to be an Al Jourgensen fan. We were still sucking up what Land of Rape and Honey gave us. And then we had The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste. We were still listening to that. And then this comes out. Al was on a fucking roll, man. He could not be stopped. Great record. There's not a bad second on this album. In the Neck is really funky. Can't Sit Still's got the funk. Something Wonderful is a great song. Just almost like a demented heavy metal disco track. I mean, like most of what RevCo did. Heavy metal techno. That's kind of what it is. It's hard to describe. Nothing sounds like this. This is the original Wax Trax edition. You can see the cut corner. That was very common. It's got a generic inner sleeve. A pretty boring release, really. They have repressed this. I've seen some picture discs that have come out of this album, but still no expanded vinyl release. It would be cool to see Cleopatra do that. I hope they do. You would think they would. I think this is the most popular RevCo release, right? Beer, Steers, and Queers. I think this is their most popular release by a long shot. And their third album is this. This is also a reissue that came out a few years ago. I do have the original press, but this actually sounds a little better. Linger Thick and Good and Other Barnyard Oddities. It's a double album. I'll open this up, show you. It's a gatefold sleeve. This is a really fun album. Here's the back. Here's the back cover. You got the guys, the three guys, the three guys, and here's the gatefold. Got this is a pretty tried and true reproduction of the original press too, by the way. Again, I do have the original press. I think this one's actually a better pressing. It sounds better. This is on like green, like a weird green colored vinyl. I just put it away. I'm not going to show it. Sorry for you colored vinyl enthusiasts. This is on like a green colored vinyl. You know what? I just remembered too. I'm going to back up a little bit. The other single that was released of this is Let's Get Physical. And it came out originally on a test press. They had to re-record the version because Olivia Newton-John did not approve of it. So the original band version came out in a 12-inch. It's just a generic sleeve and it has a stamp on it. It's really not much to see. The version I have, it's a white plain jacket. It's got a red stamp on the cover. And it's got the three guys dressed as women in lingerie. That's the version I have. The record itself is just plain white label, very boring. And yeah, the jacket's just plain white as well, but it does have that red stamp. And the band version is better. It's too bad that didn't get released here on the album because it's a far superior version. It's much funnier. The production's rougher. It's more nasty. Chris Connolly's vocals are more nasty. And maybe I should discuss that. RevCo is kind of I should discuss it, absolutely. I just forgot to. RevCo on Big Sexy Land was just the three guys, but then here it expanded. It had Ogre from Skinny Puppy, as I mentioned before. They brought in Martin Atkins, who was the drummer for Public Image Limited and Pigface and other bands. It brought in Trent Reznor. He's on this album somewhere. I don't remember where, but he was part of their little tour that they were doing at the time as they were going around touring the country of the United States and other countries, I think. He was part of the band. Chris Connolly was part of the band. He came into ministry as a vocalist. He originally started with a band called Finney Tribe, which are actually pretty cool. They started as an industrial band and then became more of a techno thing. Finney Tribe is pretty good. Anyway, it was just this is when they started bringing in all kinds of different people to play. Bill Rieflin, the great drummer, was brought in for this. There's just all kinds of immense talent revolving around this album. You want to check that out. But Let's Get Physical was released in a band version that came out on that 12-inch, and they've since re-released it. Cleopatra has put out some Ministry comps that has that band version on it, so you don't have to seek out that hard-to-find test press if you want to hear that original version. It is floating around out there on Ministry compilations. I would highly recommend you find it and check it out. Far superior to this version. The version on here is good, but it's not as good as that band version. The band version is the one you want. At any rate, you want to have this album. I would recommend picking up this original press too. I can't imagine the reissue sounding much better. Maybe it does, I don't know. At any rate, here's their third album, Linger Thick and Good. I love this album. There's a lot to soak in here. It's all over the place. I mean, it sounds like a RevCo album. It starts off with Gilacopter. They bring in Tim Leary. Al Jourgensen was buddies with Timothy Leary, and he does some vocals on here. There's all kind. It's mainly just a very distorted, fuzzy, heavy metal disco vibe on most of this, and then you get to this last track, Linger Thick and Good. And it's basically like a 9-minute track of some rapper. I don't know who he is, but it's basically him just roasting everybody in the band, talking shit about Al and Paul Barker and Chris Connolly. He's just basically roasting them like Don Rickles would roast somebody. It's really funny. It's good. It wraps up the album in a really funny, cool, fresh, interesting, funny way. It's good. But most of this album is just it's a double album filled with really well produced heavy metal techno music. And the singles that came from this album were Cracking Up and Do You Think I'm Sexy? Do You Think I'm Sexy is obviously a Rod Stewart cover. The 12-inch I have for that actually came in this sleeve that had KY Jelly in it. Those of you who know that song, it's part of the lyrics. They redid the lyrics. They're really funny, and it's a great version too. A fantastic version of Do You Think I'm Sexy? And the 12-inch actually came with KY Jelly inside the sleeve, and it came on a clear vinyl as well. Sorry, I don't have that to show you. I do have it in my archives. I didn't pull it out for this video, but it's out there. If it means that much to you, you should definitely find it. The B-sides are good too. And the B-sides to Cracking Up are okay. It has a couple of remixes and it has one B-side, I think, on the 12-inch. But this is what you want. You want to pick up the album. This is a great record through and through. My favorites are probably Creep. Sergio is really cool. Do You Think I'm Sexy is awesome. Linger Thick and Good is fantastic. This is their most varied album. This sounds more different in terms of different genres being plastered all over it. Like Beer Steers and Queers is pretty consistent. Big Sexy Land is relatively consistent. This is not very consistent, but that's not a bad thing. It serves it well. It's all over the place. Like Linger Thick and Good, it's the guy's a rapper, and the song sounds like a swing song. It sounds like a jazz song. It's just goofy. It's funny. This is their funniest album, I would think. A lot of their albums obviously have, not a lot of them, I think all of them have a serious, humorous tone to them, none more so than this one. But it doesn't detract from the high quality of the tracks. These are all really good songs in and of themselves. I mean, an album worthy of any Ministry fan to listen to. I think it's just as good production-wise as any Ministry album you'll hear. It's not lazy by any means. That's the thing I love about Al, too. He never, as funny as he is and as smart as he is, he never produced an album that was any lesser so production-wise. His music is always high quality, and this is no exception. Very cool back cover too. Great record though. After this, I lost it with RevCo. I kind of fell out of what they were doing. I can't even remember. What was it? Cocked and Loaded? Was that their next album? I don't remember. Ministry and Al in general, his stuff, most of everything he's done after this, I've had a hard time listening to. He seems to amp up the treble on his recordings now. There's no bass. It's all treble. It's hard for me to listen to. I haven't really been able to listen to really any Ministry albums post Filth Pig. I just can't get into it. I love Al. I'll always love him. I just don't think he's been able to make coherent music in his older years. I think in a lot of ways, I think this is the last great Al Jourgensen related album, Ministry, RevCo, or otherwise. This is it right here. If you're just getting into Revolting Cocks, I would just recommend that you pick up all three of these records. Start here. Start from the beginning. There's no reason not to. These are all three of these records are very natural extensions of themselves. Everything after this, check it out by all means, but I have a problem listening to it. I've never been a fan of anything post Linger Thick and Good. That's just an opinion, okay? But I can't get into anything else they've done since then. These are the three you want, and these have aged very, very, very well. Big Sexy Land has some moments on it I think most people will think sound really dated, but this album's, it's almost 40 years old now. So obviously it's going to sound dated, but there are some tracks on here I think have not dated at all. And now that I'm looking at this record, I do want to point out, I'm not holding up their live album, You Goddamn Son of a Bitch. That came out after this. So it's basically a bunch of live versions of these tracks here. I have never liked You Goddamn Son of a Bitch. I think it's a subpar recording. I think the differences between the album versions and their live versions are hardly there. There's really not a lot of difference. It is kind of a fun release. You open up the gatefold, and it's got all these hardcore porn images on it. I didn't want to show it simply for that reason. I didn't want to get in trouble, but there's images on the inside of women fucking dogs and all kinds of nasty shit. It's hilarious. It's funny if you think that kind of thing is funny. It could be deeply offensive to a lot of people, but I think that was part of that whole thing with Ministry is they went on tour and they had this big party on stage and performed all the Big Sexy Land tracks on stage, and you open up the gatefold and it's all this hardcore porn shit. It kind of definitely put you in a frame of mind of what it was like to see the circus sideshow that was Ministry live at the time. It's not a great live album. Again, I don't think it's recorded particularly well. I don't think the tracks are that good live. They're basically just backing tracks and they're more or less singing on stage to them. I don't think it's a good live album. But you're going to check it out if you're a RevCo fan, right? Or if you're a Ministry fan, you've probably already heard it. But I didn't discuss it, namely because I don't like it, and also because I didn't want to get in trouble by showing any photos of the inside cover. I guess I didn't have to show the cover anyway. But check that out if you're just getting into RevCo. It is worth listening to, but I think mainly you're going to want to get the albums. And the 12 inches, the only 12-inch I would highly recommend if you get these would be the Stainless Steel Providers 12-inch because of At the Top. At the Top is a great song. It's different for them. It's like a slowed down, almost a ballad for them. It's not a high octane heavy metal, techno, fuzz rock experience like most of what RevCo did. It's kind of like a more down tempo affair. Really cool vocals by Luke Van Acker. One of their better songs. I hope they reissue that on vinyl someday because it deserves it. It's a really good album or a really good song. Anyway, check these out. You Ministry fans, you Al Jourgensen, if you're just getting into Al Jourgensen, you want to have these three albums. It's important. These are just as much an extension of Al as any Ministry album. You want to have the context of these albums. And when you hear these, look up the years they came out, and then look up the years that the Ministry albums came out. Like this was released within the same year of Twitch. This was released within the same year of The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste. This was released within the same year of Psalm 69. That's how busy and brilliant this guy was. Okay. Al could not be stopped. He pumped out great albums at will. So listen to these and understand the context of the years they came out within the other Ministry catalog. It's important to remember these kinds of things, and it's fun to think about. He was very busy, he was very awesome, and he only put out great stuff. Check him out. That's my RevCo video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please make comments. I love to discuss this kind of stuff, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.